Hello, my woke folk. After all that damn promo, we are here today with the National Black Agenda. So important for us to get those young people involved. Let's talk about it. All right, let's go to our last point, which is voting. Let's talk about, black men, we got the right to vote in 1870 with the 15th Amendment. But subsequently after that, during Reconstruction, they instituted black codes, vagrancy laws, Jim Crow laws, things that end up thwarting our effort to vote. So hence we have a structural system that has, I think, embedded systemic racism in how we operate, right? And I think that's a part of where our system is now. So I believe our vote is our voice. Now, not just saying it as a phrase, I think that has to be something that's embodied in how you operate and act based upon that understanding that your vote is your voice. So I want to throw out a couple questions before we get to voting. Do you feel our vote counts?
I do locally, like when we're voting for our local people in our cities and state level. I feel like definitely it counts. But when it comes to the national, I don't. That's going straight to the electoral college.
Okay. So Leah, does your vote count?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a yes or no answer to that. I think it just depends.
Because it speaks to mindset, right? If you don't believe your voice counts, you probably won't be likely to vote.
And a lot of
what the
people
hell am I
don't.
voting for? It don't
And
matter
a lot of
anyway.
people don't.
Do we believe that? Go. I'm gonna let you answer the question first. Does your vote count? Your vote count?
Kwame Ture on this one.
Okay.
And kind of what he said. He said that Black people should use voting as like an organizing tool. To kind of get the issues out there, not necessarily because you believe in the system, but because you can kind of rally all the Black people together and say, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
So I wish we kind of used it as that capacity versus having true faith in the system that's never had faith in us. So I can't personally say that I agree, but I've also seen how it does matter when in a small town when I ran for city council, where it was a separation of like 80 votes.
Right.
So like had I had 80 additional
Right.
votes, I would not be here right now. You
Right.
know? So
Right.
it does matter, but it doesn't.
Right.
You know?
Okay. Indigo, does your vote count?
You know, like Celia, I'm not really sure. Like,
Okay.
I'd love to think that it does, but I'm often like, I feel like I do it because I feel like, what if I am that one person? Like, God, I can't.
Right.
I think
I would have took her over the limit if I would have just went and voted.
Yeah, well, I can't
You're like,
remember.
oh, that was me. I didn't vote for you, right?
I can't remember his first name, but I think his last name is Fetterman. He's running for Senate
John
against,
Fetterman.
Yeah,
Out of
he's running for
Pennsylvania.
Senate against Dr. Oz, which is
Yeah, I know.
crazy. But I think he won his mayoral race by one vote.
He did.
Yeah,
He
and
did.
so like I
Wow.
think in that way it's like
Talk to me.
it really your vote really can be counted. It can be a value. But I don't think that's always the case.
Okay.
And I think as Chris was saying, on a national level, it's much more diluted and it's
Okay.
much less impactful. If we even look at how the 2016 election turned
Yeah.
out and how like the electoral college was like, this is really we're gonna do something over here.
Right.
But definitely on a local level, like I feel like on a local level, it's really pertinent that you do vote, just because you're one of the local people. There are only
Yeah.
so many of
Right,
you.
right,
There's no electoral college for the locals, so it's important that you
Right.
make your voice heard
Right.
because
Definitely.
you are the person. You'll be most affected by those local things, but there's often a lot of local elections that people are just like don't put a lot of energy
Boom.
into.
And I wanted to get to that because you guys all mentioned locale,
Compton
right?
is something that popped in my head.
Go, we want the right?
Yeah, Compton and Andre Spicer.
Come on. Come on, talk to me. Come on.
I've met Dre a few
Talk
times.
about it.
They literally tried to railroad my guy.
Talk about it.
So Andre Spicer is a young councilman. Now he's a seated councilman in Compton. But originally, I think it was earlier this year, he lost the election by one vote. And come to find out that the way the vote came out, there was like a recount, and then they found these 3 absentee ballots that magically were all on the same ticket. Come to find out, one of the council people actually had paid 4 people, but he had messed up because he stopped paying one of them, and she was like, "Bet I'm finna tell everything." So she dropped it all on him, and it was those 4 illegal votes that made Andre the actual winner, and he got
That's
seated
crazy.
immediately. So
Okay.
he's the current councilman in Compton,
nice.
and that's what happened with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
See?
That
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that makes me think of the challenges against a lot of the ballots in Georgia.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
64,000.
Yeah. Gonna get to that too.
that-
I'm glad
yeah.
you guys I love you guys are aware, right? Because I'm trying to sneak these things and be like, no, you're blowing it up already.
A little research, but yeah, a lot of those ballots were like those challenges were obviously like very unnecessary and not at all legitimate. But when they went through what all of those different variables and what they were challenged for, it was like there was a typo in its alignment with like the paper versus what was in the system, and all of those things made it so that like. What did Trump lose by? Like 70,000 something votes? Right.
Oh,
like,
and Georgia lost by 11,780.
Right. Okay.
I didn't know that number.
But you know, like in Georgia, there's 11,000 that he
11,782.
lost by, but then there's 65,000 that they're challenging, and that can make a real impact in how things turn out in like national races. And so if you like have those challenges or you're paying people off, like your vote does matter apparently. Like people are trying to move.
And
your
I'm glad you
votes
guys say
around.
that. So I might have asked the wrong crowd because you guys seem very astute, right? Does the black race have an apathy toward, just a feeling, toward voting?
Is it apathy?
Are they apathetic towards voting?
Yeah.
I think so. I think a lot of, definitely people that I
Let me
talk
ask me
to,
compound that. And why?
just being black in America.
Okay.
Just walking outside of your house every day and being like, damn, still fucked up.
Yeah.
So does it make you feel, or is the turnout in the elections, the people that you voted don't pass, or you vote for the people to get in and you don't see anything change?
I think that's
Probably
one of them too.
that one. Yeah.
You vote for somebody who you think has your back, and then once they get in, it's no longer an issue.
Yeah, all their promises
you're no
are
longer
dropped.
their
Okay.
issue.
Because I thought Biden said he's gonna get rid of all black people's debt. He said he's
Biden
gonna
was
get. And
talking
he
about
ran on. He
things.
said you're gonna lose all your debt. If you black vote for me, and then when it comes out, it's like, oh, actually, everyone gets $20,000. Actually, only 10. But like.
Yeah. We'll talk about that too. Us putting the pressure on the president, and not really Congress, right? And not really understanding how our legislative body is kind of divided up, right? And I think that educational piece is really important for as we vote, right? So we understand, not to preach to the choir, I'm sure you guys already know this, but there's 3 branches in our government. We have judicial, the legislative, and we have the executive branch. So we know that the executive branch is only the president, right? He can sign executive orders, but his responsibility is not to pass policy and law. It's really your Congress, your House of Representatives, and your Senate, right? You have 435 House of Representatives, and you got 100 senators. The senators actually sign the law into place. So people can pop all they want. If they can't get it past Congress, it's never going to be law. No. We have the House of Representatives passing laws that can't get past the Senate, right? Because the Senate is the final piece. The Senate passes a law that the House of Representatives won't get. And if it's divided and you have the House of Representatives that is Democratic and you have your Senate that's Republican, no matter what the president says, it's hard to get policy through. So, Joe Biden, take me out to dinner, Joe Biden, that it can't be only the president. Right, it's got to be our understanding in voting where on the locale efforts it matters, how the policy is rolled out. Our mayors, our councilmen, our attorney generals, and our governor. Right, those bodies in the state. This is why there's separation of state and the federal piece of it. They roll out the laws. The federal government can say, "Okay, do this," but the states now have to enact it. You can sue them, right, for not following the federal law, but it's this whole course of going through, nothing's being enacted. So our thought process, this is why I'm saying the National Black Agenda we have to be strategic. Not only do we want to vote the president, we need to be looking at, and when we're going to talk about later on, like Stacey Abrams, governor. Why is the governorship important in every state? Because any laws we have, anything that happens to the state is rolled out by the governor. He has the choice. This is why we're on Ron DeSantis shit, right? All these governors that have that statewide policy to enact federal laws. So I think they tell us, look over there, point at the president when the real effort and activity is taking place around on the local level. If we rallied around our national, local things, we can control the federal level. We could be able to direct the attention and the traffic toward what we need. So my national black agenda, and the reason why I'm ending with the voting piece of it, is to strategically have us think about and talk about other mechanisms in order to interact policy that actually affects change, as opposed to saying, he made promises, he ran on that with the supposition that he would have a Senate and a House of Representatives that were also going to help him pass policy. He can push, he can negotiate, he can talk to, but unless Congress writes those laws and passes them, he can't sign anything into law. We as a people need to understand how our government works, and that way we'll affect change better. When he was running, he went to South Carolina to Representative Claiborne, right? And that gave him that push over. That's power. He would have never run the Democratic nomination if he hadn't won South Carolina, which was predominantly African-American people. He had to win that vote. To me, my national black agenda was like, oh, you need our vote? Well, we're going to need this. And we're going to need this. And we're going to need this. So a few of the things he did come out. We have our first black African-American VP ever. We have our first black woman on the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Kamala Harris. There's a first few Biden has done to us. He gave $40 million for HBCUs, right? The Anti-Lynch Act, right?
With an M or a B?
HBCU.
No, 40 billion or 40 million?
Sorry, million. 40 million.
Okay.
Yeah, 40 million. 40 million. Yeah,
It's
40
like
million.
there's like 104 of them.
I know.
Okay.
That's not a lot.
right.
I'm just making
No,
sure.
it's not a lot, but I'm
just
saying,
checking.
it's not a lot, but your point is right. But we've also had a lot of millionaire black people that haven't donated shit to our schools either. Right? Our HBCUs, especially, which one of those that had the rats and the thing in the room? I know you guys saw it on TV.
Howard.
Like, was it? Which one was it?
I think it was Howard.
It was Howard. How come we aren't taking care of our own? Of course, the government should subsidize some of that piece of it, but like we aren't coalesced around the educational piece, the reform. Remember the reparation piece? We've got 100 and how many say it?
104.
104. Our efforts should be like why we aren't nationally gearing our people, talking about it, supporting those things if that's how we educate and move the needle. Because there's no national black agenda. Go ahead.
I feel like we do. I mean, like, PWIs aren't necessarily more white people have more wealth, so they have more chances to donate that wealth to PWIs. So that's a great caveat. But otherwise, like, that's a lot to put on black people. Like, to sustain private upper education.
Not asking to sustain, do our part. We got more black millionaires and billionaires here. We pay for all kind of other shit that doesn't move the
Did they go to HBCUs?
I know.
Yeah, that's what you got to think about.
But I think too that what you haven't really talked about or said is that like the civil rights movement was wonderful because we get to stop being killed. We have equal rights. We can vote. But to me, there's a negative side there. The negative is that these formerly all black communities now get this chance to integrate. And to move into different neighborhoods. And when you do that, you take your doctors, your attorneys, your whatever out of your communities, and then you look around like, damn, why is it all bad over here? And it's like because now they don't want to be there, and they're allowed legally to go into other areas. And we got to talk about that part too, like. Some black folks don't want to be around black people.
A lot of
and like how does that play a role in kind of like our sustainability in our long term? And think about in the 60s when they got the chance to either stay with black people or go away, a lot of them moved.
Yeah, we have no succession planning, right? Meaning succession planning in terms of that if we have these thought leaders, these people there, that we're not raising the next generation to keep this kind of idea, this ideology of how to, help us grow out of our political, social, and economic issues. We continue to reinvent the same wheel. Like every year we have to add, now if you had to point to one great African-American leader, mentor right now, who would you say it is in our country? Woman or man? That you feel championing our causes, moving us forward.
They shot them all. I think about all the ones they shot and killed. So now they know
Still alive.
Shot them
No.
all.
They shot.
You said they shot them all.
They killed so many in the 60s. We don't have anymore.
Do we have any you can think of or point to, right? So without a collective message,
said LeBron James.
Okay, right, an athlete.
Yeah, right. So my point is, there's no one championing this cause on a more fundamental level. They're advocates. We have strong advocates in multiple areas that have money, right?
Okay.
That can influence in some way. But no one that says, you know what? I'll become a millionaire. I'm quitting everything I'm doing, and I'm creating this national black agenda. I'm going to go to these states where African Americans are. I'm going to make sure their locales are straight. Nobody's championing that. Nobody's even looking at that. But we should if we want to move the needle some. We can complain all we want, but we need to have that manifested into some sort of cohesive action. Should I talk about Black Lives Matter and the $90 million? Do we need to bring that up? Do we need to talk about that, y'all? Is mum the word? It's just, okay. It to me, it sullies our ability to make a point, right? To me, if it was guided, if they had some umbrella organization that said, okay, locally, Black Lives Matter seems to be a great protesting arm of our movement, and it could be fine. But it's structured under a way that you can't go and misuse funds and monies and have the thought process. You have good PR. You have people that can speak to the accounts. I watched both of the interviews with the owners of Black Lives Matter, or the founders of the end. Just in the dialogue, some of the kind of naivety around creating a business and supporting that, I would watch them and be like, God, you're a crook.
But I think too, though, like, we got to think about the fact that, like, they started it without a leader, without a figurehead, because of history and what's happened to Black organizations throughout history.
I got you.
You have one person at the forefront. Hell, even the three sisters that started it have been, like, taken down.
I know.
I mean, like, if Patrice Colors mows her lawn and she spends extra $50, they're gonna report on that.
Yeah,
shit.
because Candace Owens is all over her. But,
but what I'm saying is, like the formation of BLM and the way that it was directly related to history and how they treated Black organizations. So, yeah, they could have done more structure, but had they had more structure, would it have been villainized in the same way the Black Panthers were, or in so many other organizations?
It might have, but I feel like we're sharper now. We're more technologically advanced. We have more money now, so we should be collectively in a different space in the 21st century. Like, we should now be in a position that we can structure the things have. I think we don't have cohesiveness that allows us to get the minds that are really great in a room to make a long-term approach. Some of us, to your point, have, I don't want to say sold out, but have completely, like, I'm just tired of this shit. Let me just have ease of my mind. I'm just not associated with Black people. I'm not going to deal with them, right? So I believe in some way that the younger generation is going to be the means to make the change. But that unguided, untapped potential that's not trained, you're going to end up independently doing your own thing, and we're going to have another couple centuries or decades to go by with no cohesive message, and in the same situation that we are. So anyway, I'm just soapboxing right now, but so back to the voting rights. So the 15th Amendment, to the United States Constitution prohibits the federal government and each state from denying or abridging a citizen's right to vote on account of color, race, previous condition of servitude. It was ratified in 1870, and it really extended the right to Black men to vote. The media effects of the 15th Amendment were dramatic. Throughout the South, thousands of African Americans registered to vote. The majority in many areas, they gained substantial political power and soon thereafter began serving as local, state, and federal representatives. This really was a time, where we were beginning to move out of this kind of servitude, interaction with our country into a more integrated part, being individual citizens. But as we talked about during the course of the podcast, those presidents allowed the rolling back of that, of those laws, and hence plunged African Americans for another 100 years back into this kind of servitude mentality in our country. I think the Voting Rights Act of 1964, 1965, signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson after Kennedy was assassinated, was kind of a reviving of our opportunity to change our integration with the society in terms of our voting structure. But what I feel from there, we had really great monumental movements in the 60s and 70s, right? We know we had great proliferation of Black organizations that arose out of that. But what I do feel in the 80s, when crack came in the 90s, that really was a detriment to our communities. And then not having successive leaders to come out of the leaders that were assassinated, we kind of plunged into our individuality. The advent of technology, we have social media. I feel the new age now is born with an iPhone in their hand. That social media is everything for the newer generation. And that is a source, I believe, can be a source of great help when disseminating information, but it's also a tremendous source of misinformation. Definitely. And I feel I call it fast food knowledge, because I feel like, you get it from social media, you believe it as true, and you run with it, right? But I feel like clogs the mental artery, right? It doesn't allow you to think freely, and you take that source of information and run with it as truth, and don't pull the layer back a couple layers. So historically, I feel is vitally important for us to teach each other, right? To have these kind of dialogues where we sit down and dialogue about things that may not be about entertainment. It may not be about the fun stuff, right? But it's something that will move the needle in the direction that we have.
Yeah.
This is why I created the podcast, Stay Woke, right? It was not only to have awareness, but to also have resolution, right? To talk about like exact means. So I'm pushing this Black agenda, and there's 4 parts to it, right? One is Black politics. The next segment will be colorism. I'm going to talk about education, and I'm going to finish off with financial literacy to this whole podcast piece. So, guys, I think our vote, in a sense, is, I said it before, is our voice. But I think just saying that without educating ourselves, moving down the line, is detrimental to us as a people. Because I think, if we don't believe that person we're voting in is going to make a change, and we don't believe that we hold them accountable, I feel like we're just as much at fault in a sense, right? Because if something we want, it's our responsibility, but it's not just dole it off to the person and then, hey, you didn't do it for us, right? Let's hold them accountable. Let's vote in our local thing. Let's understand what that looks like. I didn't bring the book today, but I wanted to bring you the voting book, which it's about this thick. And who would read that before the election? Like, I don't think they make the means to vote easy, right? It's such a complicated, inundated, full of documents that you're trying to figure out 80 propositions, 40 people on the thing. Do we ever take time to sit down and go through each page, who we're going to vote for? That collective movement, if it's not done or not propagated or not promoted, probably doesn't happen. So you're just voting on advertisements from TV. I'm asking, right?
Or on the wall.
Go ahead.
Like,
on the wall,
on
the
street, wherever you see it,
on the billboards, whoever screams the loudest. And you know what? They found that out. So they push money into these advertisements because they know they count on you not reading through your ballot. Not reading in the individual propositions, not reading the candidates in. So we're fast food knowledge people. Give it to me quick, give it to me fast, and don't let me, think about it too much, right? That's mental slavery. That's exactly what mental slavery is. And if we are not taking the opportunity and chance to go through our information or find a collective way to do so, maybe it's our responsibility to create programs. Like, hey, Saturdays, right before every election, you can go to this, I don't know, this place here, a society place where you can go and they go over all the candidates. Or you get a Zoom call. It's like, you take the time. You guys have voted in every election, right? Ones that come up? The past few? Have you voted in the past few elections? Whether they were primaries or you voted? How did you pick?
I can't say I have.
Okay, how did you pick your candidate?
Through dialogue, through conversation with some of my people, or I have a little bit of a political connection in LA, so I might know somebody who's actually on the ballot.
Okay.
You may not win, but I'm voting for you
right.
anyway.
Indigo, how do you choose your candidates?
Oh, I'm like a real research person.
Okay.
So I appreciate the websites where like they have all of the candidates listed, they have all of their policy or where they stand on each type of policy, and then I'll like make a little like diagram and like write it down and then see generally what are the biggest things for me that are the most important.
Okay,
and
you're
then,
an anomaly. Okay, fine.
I'm a poli-sci major.
You're
like,
nuanced,
I
right.
literally can't vote for whatever.
That's
just
true.
be like,
That's true.
okay,
Right, yeah,
it'll
yeah.
have like I feel like
I give my whole nature to do that. Right?
Voting is a right and a privilege, and it feels weird to say that because it should just be like everyone should be able to do it.
Right.
But because I have the privilege of doing it, I feel like, and I have the resources to be, be as well versed in everything that's going on as I can be.
Okay.
There's no excuse for me not to.
Okay.
And I also would like to know what's going on, because I find the local elections to be very overwhelming, especially like propositions and things like I literally there's so much going on.
Right.
And
so how do you filter through that? I mean, you're a poli-sci major. Give us some tips.
How do I filter?
Yeah,
that?
I mean, because that booklet was this. I mean,
it's really thick. It's
right.
a lot.
Unless you're one of those people that read, I would want I would want it to be dumbed down for me.
I mean, the dumbed down idea is really nice.
Give me pros and cons.
pros and cons, but whose pros and cons are they? You know, like
Yeah.
they're not yours.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like if you research, even just going through the booklet and being like, okay, maybe you don't vote for everything.
Yeah.
Maybe you look at the list of things and
Okay.
see what their title is, and you're like, this seems like something that I care about. Go and find what the little description is.
Okay.
Maybe search up a candidate's name, see what their history is about.
Maybe, huh?
Yeah, like
Maybe.
maybe there's some controversy
How
you don't
about
know
that?
about.
How about
other
looking
than,
a fucking
you know, the
candidate
fact
up
that
once in a
they're-
while?
Yeah. But I don't know. Like,
You
search-
know what he looks like, or he look
yeah, search him up. Maybe read an article or two.
Yeah.
Listen to a 20-minute podcast
Yeah.
episode.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot of ways to not get lost in the overwhelming, like, the static of this, like these type of primaries and middle of presidential candidacy, like elections in general.
Yeah.
But if there's something that at least you have a way to look at everything that's going on, find out what's important to you,
Okay.
learn about it,
Okay.
and vote accordingly.
Okay.
But I think it's, you know, like you don't have to vote for everything, and if you're gonna vote for everything and do it uninformed, then
Come on.
there's really no point.
to me,
Like
talk to
you don't
me.
have to do that. So I feel like, at least for me, like
You don't have to do
I like
that.
to be very educated about
Okay.
it. One, but two, I think everyone should be making an educated decision when you're voting about
Agreed.
policy that will affect your life for the next 2 to 4.
Did you guys
to
hear
10
that, woke
years.
folk out there? I just want to let you know. Yes, be informed. So, Leah, how do you choose your candidate? Or propositions or
well,
policy? Yeah.
I'm like new to this. I feel like I'm trying to remember how many times I've had to go through that. But I do remember the first time I did not do my research. So I had a friend that kind of does what you do. She just, looks everybody up,
Okay.
does her thing. And me and her were close. I was like, okay, like I trust her judgment. So I'm going to choose who she chose.
Okay.
And that's probably not like, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah,
but
it's a
I mean,
move
I don't know.
away.
I was like,
Yeah.
realistically, like, I don't
Trust her
think,
judgment.
yeah. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't think I'm going to sit down and research these people. Like, to be so honest, and I don't really,
Right.
right.
I
I
need
mean,
to
it's
be
like
truthful, right?
I would never want to vote and just like, I don't know, just freehanded. That like you're not supposed to do. I feel like you said, if you're not gonna do the research, you probably should vote if it's uneducated.
But people,
you know?
this affects policy. We complain afterwards when they don't roll out the things we need, but we don't educate ourselves prior to the vote. Talk to me.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Chris, how do you choose your candidate?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I just choose whoever's black.
Okay. And if there's no black candidates on the list, then how do you choose that, but you don't vote?
No, I probably won't.
Now, what if that's an area that's going to affect you directly, but you don't have your color representation? You've missed that opportunity.
I just don't believe certain candidates. I think both of them are just bad. It's
Okay,
just- so
okay.
it's like
Lesser
You
evil?
voted for
Little-
Jackie Lacey over Gascon? She black though. let me shut up.
Shots
I
fired.
wanna-
Shots fired. Unnecessary roughness. Personal
You
foul.
left
Right. Answer.
no, I didn't.
Radio.
But good thought. So I think I'm just asking, not to put you specifically on point, but just so for the audience to see, there's a wide range of how we approach these. And I think that if really, like, we're very clear on what we don't like, what we want to have, how we move, then we should be very clear on then how we choose, how we approach that, how we research it, how we get the information that we need. That to me becomes the vital important piece. Yes or no?
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think actually, Salia, the way that you go about voting is actually really strategic. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I sometimes am like,
You do the work.
I
And I-
love I love the idea of like the fast food, give it to me quick and straight, and then I can figure it out.
Okay.
But like, not to belittle the way that you do things, but just like I feel like if you're gonna do it, then go with someone you trust, go with someone
Right,
whose intuitions
right.
you know, who values, like
Exactly.
all of those things, because at least you're educated about it.
Right.
Like, you know what you're voting on. Even if
Right.
you haven't looked
Right.
at every single detail, like
And I
all of
trust
the
you.
footnotes. Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily a planned thing. Like I wasn't like, okay, like I know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna do what my friend does. It was more like in the moment the time came, the book's in front of me, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And my friend was like, oh, I actually did this and this and this, and I was like,
Sounds good.
I did that with my
Sounds
brother.
good.
we're
Okay.
we're hella
Okay.
cool. Like
Right.
I trust you.
Yeah.
We agree on most things. So I'm like, all right, like
No, I
what'd you
think-
get for number one? Like
And
you know,
that's
like I'm like
research.
you know,
That's research.
Find a
Yeah,
means, right?
yeah.
Whatever that looks like. I'm just advocating that, if we've already made the point that our vote counts and our voice matters. So we also know that there's inherent systemic racism, that there's plots and plans in place to distract us from voting for what we need. Let's be creative in finding a way. Let's creative and support other people. Let's, if we need to find another person, you're a researcher, then go ahead and research it, and I'm going to use your research to make an informed decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine.
I'm down for
As
that.
long as there's
Fine,
research,
right?
someone
Fine.
does it.
Yeah.
Right? And you might start getting charged after that, but they were like, "Hey, you always come to me during the elections. I'm gonna need a bag."
No,
It's
for
just
that.
some people
that's
who are-
why there are
Yeah.
experts. You know what I'm
Processing
saying?
fee.
They're like,
Processing fee.
That's fine.
I want to talk about something historic toward the end of our journey, our beautiful dialogue, and I want to appreciate you guys for. We have this year in November a tremendous opportunity. We have 15 different black candidates across the country that are running for either the Senate or the governor position. At least that I have the list. I think you guys have the list of them. What I noticed, so if you look at your list, there are 3 Republicans on here on the list I have, and I believe there aren't support nationally for local positions like Alabama, Arkansas. I would say what's the other? Yeah, Alabama, Arkansas, maybe Iowa, and I don't know, is that Mississippi or Maryland. I don't really see nationally like any support, and these are Democratic representatives. Some of them are, and some are Republican. I don't really see nationally support for the rural areas. Right. And for me, these are candidates we've not had in the history. There have only been in the history 3 black senators. 11 black senators total in the entire history. In the 100 or so years of having, or more, only 11, right? Currently, we only have 3 black senators. 1 is a Republican and 2 are Democrats. And we have 58 representatives in the House of Representatives that are black out of 435, right? So when we have people on the ballot, on the agenda that are running for these key positions, there are only 100 senators. So every Senate role counts. You get 2 senators per state, right? So in the southern states, they've had representation from these senators that have been there for decades. And the majority of the populations are black. And those people haven't represented any of their interests. So when they go to Congress and vote, they're never going to happen in those states. My national black agenda then would take these rural areas that have representation or have people that are running for office, the newer generation, the Gen Zs, and that are looking to go in and run for office, which we didn't have before. This is where we need that funding. Your position, when you were running, why didn't I don't know if the state rallied around you or the nation rallied around you as your position. Probably not at all, right?
Small town, no.
Right? But and how did they know? Even if your state had a coalition, say they were part of a bigger coalition, to say, okay, now we're looking at all the counties in California. We know we have these 3 black representatives running in these 3 councilman positions, which make policy for that area highly, clearly important. But where's your support? You might not financially have that stake in doing so. Right? Where's your national attention to these positions? Because there's no focal point there. They focus on the positions that matter to them to run policy, but anything else doesn't. And you may be under the Democratic umbrella, but you're not getting Democratic dollars to support areas in order to move the needle some. Those high profile areas, like you mentioned, John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania, Gretchen Whitmer out of Michigan. You got Mandela Barnes, was a brother out of Wisconsin, running for the seat against Ron Johnson. You got Sherry Beasley in South Carolina. These are also black figures. You never hear any of those names on, but the national positions, like those other ones, you hear those, right? But the Democratic Party has all these candidates that are African American, 15 running across the country that are not getting that same kind of support. Right. And I think if we depend on the government to decide to support us, we're always going to be waiting. Right. So I think if we don't take the extra added step that now we have multimillionaires, we got a couple of billionaires in our crew to create this cohesive black national agenda that targets the geographic areas where our people are and are suffering, we're never going to move the needle. We're going to continue to have creating these organizations like Color of Change, Black Lives Matter, NAACP, that's been around forever, that still hasn't intricately moved the systemic needle, right? There's the systemic plan across the board. So I brought this to the attention. We talked about reparations, we talked about voting, we talked about Reconstruction, but the 2 latter pieces, reparation and this voting piece, now, that neo-reconstruction area, these are the two kind of points I really want to kind of walk away with today as starting points for us to move our national needle in terms of closing this social, political, and economic gap of African Americans and the rest of the nation. So yeah, that's voting. Any other thoughts around voting? Besides, Mike, I full on complain about the lack of support. But yeah, so Chris, I wanna just kind of wrap our final kind of talk today with some closing thoughts. Right? We discussed Reconstruction, right? The effect that had on the I don't call it nuclear unit, but the unit of the family, right? We discussed in reparations, what our responsibility is toward helping with what some of our downfalls, some of the things that we can help support in, what that looked like for us then and now. We discussed neo-reconstruction reparations. Like, is it just monetarily or is it educational, right? Is it ownership, property and land to move the needle? And then we finished off with voting, right? Whether we are apathetic, whether we need to, help each other, support each other during these times of our vote and these primaries and these midterm elections coming up, what that collective needle looks like, doing our research, doing our homework, or finding someone to do the research and homework for you, right? And then being besties with that person to move on. But again, I'm really hoping for us to be more informed and less influenced. Right? To be informed, to make an educated choice on your own in your own area about how you integrate with that piece. So I wanted to thank each of you today for coming. You guys have been amazing, great sources of good dialogue, just to chop it up with me. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to go around, and I'm going to start with you, Chris. Let's get some last words. What's your overall feeling? And I also want to ask the question clearly: what are you going to walk away from here with today, and what are you going to do differently?
Well, I'm definitely going to do better at researching candidates when I vote and propositions. So next time I don't get beat up about it. But I mean, overall, I just think we just need to heal as black people. Like we got to do better. We got to want to do better, and we got to expect better from each other. And I think that's just like the basis of how we're going to do better. I mean, we got to understand that there is a problem. And, recognize it and, don't be content with just being down there. We have to want to elevate ourselves as a people.
Thank you, Chris. So, Leah, thoughts? What are you going to walk away with from today, and what are you going to do different?
Similar to what you said, research. I think it's definitely like a priority thing for me. Like, I know it's really important to be educated on all of this, but I just I've never been the type of person to just put that first. Like I feel like I have other stuff I think about before that, And I'm not okay with that. I want to balance it because it's important. It's really important. Everything we talk about today is like super important. And I feel like most people are not educated as they should be, especially as Black people. Like you need to know all this. But I'll walk away today being a researcher. Maybe I'll be the friend. Maybe I'll be the friend that does the research. Maybe my friends will want to,
right? See you next time.
Right, maybe. We'll see. But yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Brooke, talk to me. What did you learn today, and what are you going to walk away with?
Learn today?
Or do different. What are you going to walk away? What are you going to do different now?
I think learn today was just the powerful voices that are in the room. The youth political movement, the Black youth political movement is doing pretty good.
Okay.
The future's looking bright. And as somebody who was definitely kind of anti-politics for a while, especially after my experience running for city council, this kind of makes me want to jump back in a little bit more. I think what I'm going to do differently.
I hear run for office again.
You got my vote.
I got my vote. Woo. Right.
I mean, I might manage a campaign, but be on the forefront.
That heat.
I can write a good speech for you. But I don't know. But I think what I'm going to do differently, honestly, is nothing. I think that as an educator and as a community activist and somebody who's been involved in politics, I think just continuing to do what I've been doing is what needs to happen. And hopefully I can inspire other people to, do things that I've done.
I think you should have this dialogue too in school more, that you should get this thing together and start having this dialogue. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Indigo, talk to me. What did you learn today and what are you going to do different?
I think I learned how varied our perspectives are. Like I think the Black vote and just Black political ideology is like very monolithic in conversation.
Okay.
But it's really nice to have a conversation where there's like openness about where we stand, and like I think your perspective about African Americanness and just the connection with our roots and that collective Africanism globally, I think is a really it helps me just broaden my perspective about like what it means to be who I am and like my personal identity. So that's a great thing to walk away with. What I would do differently, I think I would just like to be more aware about like nationally what's going on. And then like Black politics, as you were saying, it's unfortunate that it's its own section, but it's something that I should be definitely more aware about. So yeah, and then I'll just keep going to class.
Keep
going to class.
Keep doing what you're doing, but I also want you guys to encourage other people, right? Right. This is the message really that you take back, right? And I bring you on to the podcast is for definitely to pull your knowledge together, to have great dialogue, but it's for you to walk away being advocates for this, right? Understanding what that looks like and being able to share that with another person, like teach each one. Right? Every person you find, you really, that you can share and have that dialogue with, and really encourage them to, take control of their own life. Like, let's not just live like to survive. Let's live to thrive.
Yes.
Let's find a way to help all of us collectively. I'm gonna leave you with this last thought. I do believe that, and this is my personal opinion, like there is no way for us as a people to move the needle unless we multinationally, multiracially, multiculturally integrate or get the support from people here. I think there's just no way to do it. I think to do that, we have to remove stereotypes and stigmas that are attached to how we define ourselves. Just my opinion in terms of culture, color, and race. I think integrated into that is an aspect that forces separation. For me, I think the idea of naming ourselves a color instead of our culture is a huge thing, and I think it's a divisive tactic that's used to keep these things segregated and to move that needle. I think a renaming of that, a reclassification of that is required to do so. So, this National Black Agenda for me is not only for Black people. It's a way for us first pass to find mechanisms within our own community to really strengthen and unite. But then after that, there has to be a collective and a concerted effort to unite multiculturally across the board in order to strategically move the needle. We just don't have the numbers. There are 330 million Americans in America, and there's only 45 million African Americans. So let's do the math and let's be clear what that looks like. We're going to need allies. We're going to need advocates. We're going to need individuals. And if our rhetoric and our dialogue is divisive in doing so, I think it's less likely that we'll bring people aboard. Now, speak your truth. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. We call that term cognitive dissonance. Have you guys heard that term? Mm-hmm. It's this that I've learned something for so long. I've believed it. I've practiced it so long. And when I hear the truth that's different from what I've digested for so long, I can't take it. I can't process that truth. It's hard for me to get that. That's cognitive dissonance. I can't move. I can't digest that truth because it erases everything that I spent my entire life building upon, right? That's a difficulty a lot of us suffers from. Not only us, but I think even white America. That's why they don't want to hear about slavery, right? It's hard to digest because many of them probably aren't racist, right? They probably aren't discriminatory. They probably aren't that way. But generationally, their ancestors they were built in that, their wealth comes from that. It's not a hard pill to swallow and accept in some sense, not make excuses for them, but that's kind of where they are. So our plan, I believe, this agenda needs to have key leaders in our organization nationwide that have money, that have the plays, that have it to get our leaders together collectively and then start to map out what that agenda looks like, geographically specific, meaning that when people in Louisiana are having, hurricanes and more than and the levee breaks 5 times every year, let's find a way to help them out nationally and not let it be predicated solely upon the actual state itself. So I want to thank you guys so much. I say let's give all of us a round of applause. Round of applause. And in closing, I want to always say to you again, be informed, not influenced. Thank you, my woke folk. Thank you, everyone, for joining myself. And that's it. Let's go. Hello, my woke folk. Wasn't that a great discussion? Reconstruction, neo-reconstruction, discussing that with our future youth. Amazing. Please stay tuned for our next podcast coming up. It'll be dope. Don't go. Subscribe, like, comment, follow, holla.